Meet Lara, founder of Found and Flourished. In this episode of Mental Memos, she'll be teaching us how to build a community. Let's get into it.
All right, so let's get started. Do you want to just start with introducing yourself and talking about Found and Flourish and all that good stuff?
Perfect. Cool. Okay, so hi, I am Lara Sheldrake. I'm the founder of Found and Flourish. We are a female founders online membership, media and events platform. We've been running for just over 2 years, less than 2 years officially. We officially launched in September 2018. And it's been quite the journey. But I guess that's how I describe it in a nutshell. We exist to empower women in business and to provide them with resources, a safe space, community, and solidarity for anyone who's looking to launch, grow, or scale their dream business.
And so how did this idea come about?
So I was on maternity leave. Previous to being pregnant, I ran my own social media consultancy. I absolutely loved it. I found it incredibly lonely at times, but I really enjoyed, being my own boss, deciding when I was going to work and with who. So that part I absolutely loved, but I did find it really lonely. And after my son was born, about 3 months in, I started to think about what I wanted to do when I came off mat leave. I wasn't sure I wanted to go back to working by myself, but I knew that I wanted to create something whereby I could ideally grow a community of women, like-minded women, maybe go back to working within my consultancy, but actually having other people around me supporting me on that journey. Because running a business can be really lonely. If you add into the mix being a new mum, it is so isolating sometimes because you're on this new journey again and you're learning all these new things. So that's where the idea of Found and Flourish came about. Initially, it was a community, a newsletter, and quite quickly it started to grow into an events platform where we were putting on networking events, we had panel discussions, and from there, I guess it's just grown. And what was initially created to serve this purpose of providing community and solidarity for women has in the last 2 years grown and developed into now an online platform with an academy, a members hub, an online membership, and essentially a business that I never thought I'd be running. It's been amazing.
So you've reached a lot of success pretty quickly in 2 years. A lot of businesses struggle for a lot longer than that. So I think what a lot of women watching this will want to know is kind of how you got the word out there, how it's, it's all well and good to want to create a community, but how do you find those people to kind of bring into the fold and engage with you and convince them to stay?
So I think there are so many different factors that can be kind of brought into the conversation here. I think the first one is that I was creating a solution for a problem I was experiencing. So from the offset, it was in an incredibly authentic position in the market, because I was saying, look, I'm creating this because I need this. If you are like me, then join me. I think being clear on my message from the start was also really helpful. Highlighting my story, being really open and again authentic and transparent about why the business existed. David Hyatt, who is an email marketing genius, and he wrote a book called I think it was Write, Do, Open or something. That's probably incorrect, but look up David Hyatt. He wrote a great book around sort of building an engaged online community, and he talks about attracting like. And when you are really transparent and open about your passion, your desires, your mission, what it is you're doing in life, naturally people will be attracted to you who are going through similar things or who are aligned with your values or who share the same experiences. So very quickly, I feel like being open about my journey and the reason why the business existed allowed for other people to relate and therefore want to kind of, jump on this journey with me. I also feel my social media branding background, also my marketing experience helped, because I kind of knew how to grow something based on being online, being present, knowing how to use social media, growing the Instagram account. I probably have a few platforms to thank for, and I'm heavily reliant on in growing the business. And I'd say my email marketing, so newsletter platform, that was one of the first things that I set up with the business, which was a great way for people to sign up their interest, finding out more when it was actually officially launched. Through to Instagram, people love it and hate it. Sometimes I love it, sometimes I hate it, and I think it has to be used responsibly. But when I ask people who have signed up to something, I say, where did you hear about us? It's usually Instagram. And so without that platform, I feel like we probably wouldn't have grown as quickly. But I also value that you must never rely on one platform solely. And that's what I think is so great about Restless Mag. You've got an app, you've got all this amazing content. It's not just, follow us on Instagram to find out what we're doing. And for us, we've got the online platform, we've got our members hub, and as I said, our newsletter. So I think it's also about knowing your audience, knowing where they are, and then knowing how to speak to them, and not trying to be everywhere at once, because that's just not going to work. And also my final kind of, the final factor I wanted to mention was events are such a great way to build a community. People long for connection, and a lot of the time, let's just forget the global pandemic for a minute. A lot of the time people crave that connection in real life, IRL. And so I think it's really important if you want to grow a community. Yes, of course, online communities are great, especially during a time like now when physically we can't actually be in the same room as one another. But I think events are such a great way to get your name out there, to get the brand out there, and also to provide a space where your like-minded people can connect. And that's another reason why I think the community is growing quite quickly, because also word of mouth marketing is really underrated. But when you go to an amazing event, you will tell 10 people. You'll say, oh my God, I just went to this great event. I met some really nice people. The host was lovely. The food was awesome. The venue was beautiful. When you read something, you might share it with a couple of people. You might tell one person. But I think there's an impact that events have that I don't think anything else does when it comes to, I guess, marketing, because that's what it is. And at the time, I didn't realize it was marketing. At the time I was like, let's meet up, let's interview a couple of founders, let's hear how they built their businesses. But quite quickly, I saw the value and the impact it was having on women's lives when they were able to meet like-minded people and have a hug. Our networking event, Hugs and Brunch, is super popular. It sells out in 24 hours. We grew it from, we had 8 people in our first one, and now we have 30 people max. At the moment, that's the most I can imagine in one room having a brunch. But when all this malarkey dies down, I'd love to host a massive Found and Flourished get together, which will probably be bigger, but I don't know when that will be. I guess rules dependent, but yeah, it's so I don't know. There's a lot of things I've just said there. I hope that helps a little bit, but yeah, it's been an interesting couple of years, kind of seeing what's worked and what hasn't, and what people really crave. And I think connection is probably one of the main things.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff. I mean, so for a lot of that, what I take from that is to really know your why and to have a purpose outside of just building a community. Do you think that's fair to say? Maybe if you're just building a community to be popular on Instagram, maybe that's not enough of a reason. What do you think?
I would totally agree. And this is something that I always bang on about. Know your purpose, know your why, because that guides you through everything else that you do. If you don't have a why and you don't have a reason why you're actually creating something and you know, if you're not clear on the driver, what gets you up in the morning, then no one else will be. And your why tends to be quite emotive. Your why is, you know, you're looking to solve a problem. You're looking to make people's lives better, easier, I guess richer in some way. And if you're clear on that and you're clear on your message, people relate to that, and people are drawn to that as well. So yeah, you know your why, you know your purpose. Actually, I've got a couple of steps that I share when people ask how to build an engaged community. And number one is define who you are, what you stand for, your values, your vision, your mission, you know, how you hope to see the world in a better place based on what you're doing right now. And I think that's really important. So yeah, I'd 100% say that's it.
Yeah, and I feel like that's actually probably the hardest step.
And I think, you know what, I think it's easy and it's hard. It's easy to know why you're doing something. You know, let's take you and this wonderful mission you're on. I'm sure you could describe it better, but creating this safe space for women who have, you know, been through something pretty traumatic, or they simply, you know, align with your values. They're feminists, they're change makers, they're here to support one another. You know, that's amazing. That's amazing. I think the hardest thing sometimes is to articulate it. It's how can you articulate it in a way that's going to relate to as many people as possible, whilst also staying true to exactly what you're trying to do in the world. But I think people deep down know what it is they're doing, and it's the articulating and it's working it out. So my advice would be for anyone who's struggling to articulate it to write down mission. So what it is you're doing, your purpose, your why are you doing it, your vision, how you see the world improving based on what you're providing, and then your values. You know, maybe it's 3, maybe it's 6. You know, just write a couple down. Write the things that are really important to you and your business and your non-negotiables. So the things that you will not disregard for anyone or anything. And if you can have those clearly laid out, and maybe even on your website, or you can talk about them across your socials, that's going to be really powerful. And that's where you're going to start seeing people who are like-minded, you know, knocking on your door, asking to be a part of your community.
Okay, great. So can we talk a little bit about the mechanics of having a community? I feel like a lot of people think that you need to have like app coders or like a fancy web developer. I mean, do you think that that's necessary to have an online community? Or like, I mean, for me, I kind of see it as it can be as simple as a Facebook group or even a private Instagram that, you know, you guys had that discussion before, you know, you allow access or something like that. What are your kind of thoughts on this?
Yeah, 100%. I think we are so blessed in a world today where we have technology at our fingertips. You do not need to be a coder. You have out-of-the-box solutions like Squarespace and stuff like that. You've got platforms like Slack. As you say, you've got Instagram, Facebook groups. You could even create a couple of private pages on your website where people need a password to access it. So the way I did it was, for the best part of 2 years, Found and Flourished was a free community. So we had a website that was open and public to everyone. We've still got that. So we've got our blog, our events page, podcast page, contact page and homepage. And our newsletter, which, as I say, is something that's been great to, you know, update the community on what we're doing, the events that are coming up, resources, tools, insights for women who may need some support in various areas of business. And we have an Instagram and then public Facebook page. Now, when I first set up the business, I rushed into things, and I actually opened up a Facebook group and quite quickly realized that if I did want to monetize something later down the line, a Facebook group would probably be part of that offering. So I then closed it down and just kept the Facebook page and the Instagram. And we are actually on Twitter as well, because I feel like Twitter's a great place to be, especially in business. It's quite an entrepreneurial, innovative space. So we're on there as well, and we share our resources across that platform. And I think it was only when I started to consider how I was going to monetize it, after I knew I had a big enough audience, that through a bit of market research, asking the community what it was they wanted and needed, what they were prepared to pay for what I was planning on offering. It was only then that I was able to start looking into other ways in which I could provide value and create a more kind of walled garden approach, like protected community that was closed for people who were paying. And I was going backwards and forwards with platforms like Slack, because Slack is really good, especially in business. I think it's quite popular in the startup world. It's great because you've got different channels and you can communicate with people across different like subjects. Facebook groups has a really similar feature where you can add topics, so it's fairly similar, but the usability is a bit different. I don't know if I'm going into too much detail about logistics. Just stop me if it gets a bit boring.
No, logistics is good. I think everybody wants to hear about logistics, especially because I think that, I mean, personally, I haven't found a lot of written resources literally around like how mechanically to do it, right? But yeah, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
Yeah, so I mean, we eventually went with a Facebook group because that was something that the community said, the majority of them said they wanted to use. And then the Members Hub, which is essentially a private access part within our website. So that's WordPress, but you can do that on Squarespace, Wix, WordPress, pretty much any website. So my advice would be, if you want to create something that's private, you don't need to develop anything. You can just use a group, a Facebook group, a Slack channel. You can create some private pages on a website, but know your audience. Again, it goes back to, where are they going to be? Do they want to be in Facebook? Would they rather be on Slack? Would they like a WhatsApp group? And I think it's about just understanding where would be the best place for them. I mean, I love the fact that you have an app. You've got that community online, you've got the resources there. That's, I think, the next step for Found and Flourished. I'd love to have, I always said I'd have like a web app, and then I might create an app, because they're quite expensive to make.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been through the whole process, and
Yeah.
I think it's incredible that you have this now, and now you're working on your offering, which is already so brilliant. But I think, an app's like, the next step for me, I think. But to answer your question in a very long-winded way, you don't need to be a developer, and I think it's just, what you're going to be comfortable using and what your community are going to want to use.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of this kind of also connects to the idea that I feel like a lot of people, when they're first starting out, they like really beat up on themselves that they're not having this like immediate success, or that they're not immediately like this ginormous, like multi-layered or multifaceted platform. And like for me, I feel like one of the not mistakes, but maybe I could have been a little bit smarter. And like when I started all of the different facets of Restless, because I was like really rushing into everything because I was really excited. But then, I would get really overwhelmed, and actually I probably could have done it at a slower pace and still be at the same level of success today, and actually been a lot less stressed out.
It's really interesting. It's a bit like when people say, if I had been warned or told about what the first couple of years of entrepreneurship would have been like, there's no way I would have stuck it out. I would not have even signed up to set up my own business if I knew how hard it was going to be. I think hindsight's a beautiful thing, and it's funny because I don't know, do you really think that you'd be in the same place if you had approached things differently at a slower pace?
Well, I think that I didn't have to do an app, a newsletter, and a website all at the same time, right? Like I could have waited to do the newsletter like in a few months after we launched the app, instead of trying to do everything at once. I think they've all had like really positive impacts, but I think a lot of it is like staggering, especially when you have Russ is still a really small team. Everyone's part-time except for myself. And so when you are working on those really limited budgets, you can end up like spreading yourself too thin, and also your budget's too thin if you're trying to do everything at once instead of staggering it. So I don't know if I would have waited like a year to also do the newsletter, but maybe I would have waited like another month. Do you know what I mean? And so I feel like that might not have had such an impact on my like overall business, but it would have definitely had a lot. It would have, I think, served to make everything a lot more organized and a lot more like orderly. I've been stalking a lot of female founders online, and from what I can see from a lot of people who are like reach that massive success is that they know how to restrain themselves, which is something that I don't know how to do.
Yeah, but do you know what? I think they probably learned that over time.
Yeah.
And you are learning over time that actually you don't need to launch 3 business offerings in one go. I feel like, it was the newsletter first, it was the social media, it was the membership hub. Yes, it was slightly staggered, but at the same time, I was trying to do everything at the same time. So I was trying to do the newsletter, the podcast, the events, everything at once. And I look back, and although at the time I was super stressed and super tired, the business wouldn't have grown how it did if I hadn't done those things. And I also think, obviously my advice would be to try and do one thing at a time. And I feel like you only learn that when you've done a bunch of things and you've been able to test what was effective and what wasn't, what maybe wasn't necessary, but you weren't to know that before you decided to launch a website and a newsletter at the same time. And I think what's really nice about that is you were able to communicate via your newsletter to your existing community, tell them to sign up to find out more about the app and stuff like that, and then the app is like the thing that you then ask them to sign up to via the newsletter, for example. So I think my comments would be, if you feel like you're doing too much, you probably are, especially if you're an ambitious person who, wants to do everything at once. Because if you're thinking, oh, I'm taking on too much right now, the likelihood is you are. And I think a really good piece of advice I was given was to write down everything, either whether it's your offering or your services or everything that you're doing, and look at your end goal. So what is it you want to achieve? You might not know what your 10-year end of the decade goal is, but you'll have a 6-month or a year one. What are you doing on that list that's going to get you there, and what could be phase 2 to get you there? And then it's about prioritizing, and the things that you can do, you take on. The things that you can delegate, and then the things that you can either put in a bin or save till later, do just that. And I know it sounds super simple, but just getting everything on a piece of paper when it's not in your head just makes all the difference, because you can literally see in black and white everything that you're doing, and then you can really start to evaluate the things that you really need to do based compared to the things that actually you don't need to do. You think you need to do because someone else is doing it, but actually it's not going to get you to your end goal, or at least your 6-month, a year goal. But it's so easy to say that kind of stuff in hindsight, and it's so easy to give advice, but I don't know, a lot of the time I don't take my own advice. I try and just do everything all the time. So I would not condone, because that's part of the burnout culture that we're trying to, I guess, we're fighting against that, aren't we? We want to encourage women to have some kind of work-life balance, and just to know when to slow down, and to know that it's not about doing everything all of the time, because actually it's in those moments that you take a break, that you have clarity and you can think really creatively about where you want to take the business.
Yeah, definitely. And so, say someone, okay, they start an online community, it's growing, they're getting all these people involved, and then all of a sudden they're like, whoa, like there are so many people I have to keep on top of, like I have to respond to. And I feel like you can get, like, at least for me, like I can get really sucked into like just like correspondence, or just like, the community management side. But actually, like that can, if that becomes your entire job, you don't have room to like innovate for that community that you're constantly talking to, which isn't a bad thing, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I've experienced that a lot, and I only hired a team. I'd probably say at the beginning of lockdown, ironically, because that's also when I launched our paid version of our community. So I launched the membership in March, and as soon as I got enough cash, I hired a team of people who were able to support me on the running of the business, so I could focus on the growing, the innovation, the strategic stuff, all the great stuff that leaders and business owners need time to really invest in. So for a year and a half or more than that, I was running the community on my own. I was creating the social media posts, I was writing the comments, the captions, I was getting back to all the community members. And I think that's quite common when you're starting out and setting something up. But my advice would be, when you get to a point where you can afford to outsource, when you find yourself day in, day out, because the thing is, running a community, it's hard work, it's exhausting, it's empowering, and it's energizing, because the women and the people and your community that you're constantly in touch with and communicating with, like, that is what I live for. But it's also incredibly exhausting, and it's the kind of job that never finishes, never ends. So you have to put some boundaries in place, and it could be allocating an hour a day to get back to everyone. So if people are writing messages throughout the day and you're getting pings, turn your notifications off and set an hour a day where you can get back to everyone, and that then everyone's heard from you and you've done your job, and then you've had all that other time to focus on other things within the business. If you have enough cash, outsource, delegate the community management to someone. It needs to be someone you trust, so you do that with them for a while, you train them up, you go back to your purpose, your why, your values, you make sure that they're fully ingrained within them. And then again, you've got more time to focus on the things that really, are going to push your business forward. I think they're probably, the biggest two kind of pieces of advice I would give for someone who's running a community and finds himself continuously just responding to messages, because you could do that all day. It would literally, that's like a full-time job for someone. So you have to be really strict, and you either have to allocate specific time of the day to do it, or you outsource it.
Yeah, definitely. So can we talk a little bit about like any kind of mistakes that you've made along the way, or any like lessons you had to learn like the hard way, if you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah, of course. I'm just trying to think of things. There's loads of failures, loads of mistakes. I'm just trying to think of ones that might be helpful. I think rushing into things and doing things like setting up a Facebook group when I wasn't fully aware of what my strategy was. And this is something that, mistakes are going to happen. And had I not done that, I wouldn't have then, I guess it was a good lesson for me to know that I needed to know where I was going in the business, at least midterm, so that I knew actually I'm going to want to monetize this at some point, because it became such a big part of my working life. I knew for it to survive, it had to be monetized. So rushing into things and not having that as part of the strategy, or not really fully considering, okay, so if I'm going to be working X number of hours a day and I'm going to be building something, how am I then going to monetize it, and what can I either keep up my sleeve or save for a phase 2 launch, so that I know that I've got some added value when I'm ready to launch a paid version. So that was a mistake I made. There are other mistakes that I've made that I've learned along the way, like when I've collaborated with people. I am like, what you see is what you get, heart on the sleeve. I'm really like honest and trusting, and sometimes to the detriment of me or my business or my mental health. And I've had a situation actually recently where I was working with someone, and it was a collaborator, and I said on the phone, this is my budget, and she was like, great, okay. She did the work, and then she charged me double, and nothing had been in writing, and she said, but these are my rates. And I was like, and you know what, I paid it, and I thought, lesson learned, Lara.
Yeah.
Like, put stuff in writing, write it down in black and white, you know, like I was really shocked that actually someone would be like that, but it's business, it's not personal, and I just had to learn for it. What was your experience?
Well, I think the same. I think that there is like a level of trust that you have for people when you go into business, and it's not that people are bad, but it's like everybody, especially right now, everybody, you know, wants to make $1. Everybody, like, they're going to push for as high of a rate or like any kind of inch that they can take. And so again, like, when you don't write things down, it just opens up so many issues. Even if, you know, both parties involved are like so well-meaning, there are so many, like, especially like, you know, if you're a community builder, you're probably working mostly digitally, and like when you're not face to face, again, like there's a whole other like level of like miscommunications that can happen. Like, I mean, I so often like have to pick up the phone to like a team member, even because even my texts, like, I don't think, you know, that sometimes they don't really communicate what I'm trying to say. So if you're only talking to someone on email or like whatever, like so many potential things could happen, even if everyone is very well-meaning. But then also on occasion, like there aren't like the most, there are a few people who like aren't well-meaning, right? And I think that also is when like it's important to like, you know, there are all of these really great freelance lawyers. You know, I use this woman, her on Instagram, her name is like Lucy Legal, and she's really great. And so like, you know, kind of having some like kind of like legal framework for your business in place, having those NDAs, like when someone's like, you know, if you like, for example, like if you hired like, and I haven't done this yet, but if I do hire an assistant to like help me stay organized, like that person needs to sign an NDA because she has access to like every single piece of proprietary information or my passwords or like things like that. But, or like even a contract, if I've agreed with someone to do like X amount of videos for the app, like, you know, I learned the hard way, like if you don't do a contract, you know, who knows what's going to happen. And a lot of these things aren't like necessarily like enforceable, but you have those clear expectations set out and you have it in this one document, right? And then both parties like know, and then there's really no room for argument. And I feel like that clarity is just so valuable. Like I honestly feel like I love to trust people. Like I'm a people pleaser. I don't feel comfortable bringing in contracts or like things like that. But when I did start doing that, it made like my life so much easier, and other people and the people who worked with me so much easier, because like everybody knew what was going on. There was no room for like
misunderstanding.
Yeah. And so I don't know, like I feel like it's like not the done thing to say, like, yeah, there are some people out there who might do you wrong, but there are. Yeah. And there are also some people out there who are well-meaning but make mistakes. So
yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And if things are written down in black and white, there's no room for error. Yeah. And therefore, you know, there is no misunderstanding. So yeah, I think that would be a really big lesson learned from my part. And I guess same with you, right? I guess,
definitely.
You know, having stuff in black and white, knowing exactly the agreement that you're putting in place with the people you're working with, and then having that peace of mind is so important.
Yeah, definitely. And then also keeping track of your finances, like a funky spreadsheet.
Oh my God, yeah. Yes. Do you know what? So I've never been very on top of things like this. I've had to learn this, being self-employed and being a mom and working out, you know, the government like gives you a grant for your kids to go to nursery and stuff like that. So I've had to be really on that in terms of tax and knowing where my money's going. But if it's not your thing, find someone whose thing it is. For example, I'm really fortunate. My partner, my husband, he's really good at the money side of things. So I've kind of unofficially hired him as my CFO. And once a month we sit down and we do like an account plan of the business, the income, what's going out, you know, budget, stuff like that, forecasting. I've never learned this kind of stuff. I was never taught it at school. We just aren't. So if you're someone who's into numbers, great, stay on top of them. And if you're not, follow Instagram accounts like Miss Lolly or Ellie Austin. You know her. This Girl Talks Money. Ellie Austin Williams. You know, anyone who talks about money, follow them, read about it, make it part of your language and your daily or weekly or monthly routine, because staying on top of your money is essential, especially if you're running a business and trying to run a community as well. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, the most basic thing that I just was too afraid to even remember to do in the beginning is just write it down. Oh, you paid someone. Okay, make a note in one place. It's you don't have to be I'm terrible at math. When I was in high school, I definitely cheated on a few math tests. Okay. This is not I don't have that skill, but literally just writing it down in a list all in one place, it can be a huge difference. And also lessens the stress, especially because again, I think that anyone building a community, no matter how organized they are, their life is going to be a little hectic because they've got all of these people, all of these different priorities always happening. And I think maybe that's for me, I love actually the community side of, the Restless app is probably the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning at this point, more than other parts of the business. But at the same time, I think that, yeah, it's important to acknowledge that it can be a little intense sometimes too.
Yeah, write stuff down. That's the biggest takeaway. Just get it all down so that you don't have to think of it all the time, because your head's already going crazy with everything else that's going on.
Yeah, definitely. So do you have any other advice in terms of someone who's because I feel anybody watching this is probably going to be, a small business owner or is about to launch their business. So do you have any advice for someone who maybe is just starting or is in the weeds and is whoa, I'm so overwhelmed with everything?
Yeah, it's incredibly overwhelming and it can be incredibly lonely. My biggest tip would be to find a community. And the reason why I say that is because it's not just about not being lonely anymore, but through your community, you will probably find mentors, skills experts, people who have advice who can share with you what they went through and how they overcame certain challenges, maybe tips, just even hearing their stories. It's so empowering. And what keeps me going with my community is seeing all the collaborations within it. It's incredible. Every day I hear about women working with one another. There are business partners that have found each other through the community, clients, friends for life. And I think, business is tough enough. You don't need to go through it on your own. So find a community, follow, obviously these people are part of Restless anyway. So they'll know the importance and the power of being a part of the community, but find like-minded people and ask for help. Don't feel like you have to do anything on your own. You're not an island. You don't need all the skills. You don't need to know all the people. So yeah, surround yourself by like-minded people and know that you never need to be alone in this journey.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that a lot of people, whatever kind of area they're in, whether it's a product that they're creating or anything else. I mean, I feel I personally feel a lot of pressure to act like everything is perfect all the time. And I don't really know how to acknowledge that. Actually, I think I posted something a couple weeks ago and it looked great, right? And this is on my personal account, so it really wasn't any big thing, but I was crying all that day. I was crying all that day while posting something that was everything's cool, right? Do you know what I mean? So I think, and because I didn't feel I could be honest about that. And technically you can, right? But I think, especially when you're trying to woo investors, I am right now, I'm just dipping my toe into that. And there's this idea that you're not supposed to have emotions or you're not supposed to acknowledge that you can't do everything by yourself. And I think that that's actually really toxic. And actually, the more I talk to investors, the more I realize that kind of thinking isn't necessarily the case.
I think being authentic and open about your journey is so important, but I also think it's still very well saying, oh, be honest, tell everyone how crap it is when it's crap and you're experiencing the lows, because there are highs and lows. But actually, it's so much easier to reflect on a tough time. So for example, you wouldn't have gone, I'm crying. But the next day, you may have gone, yesterday was really shit. I found it really tough and I was crying all throughout the day. These are the reasons why I'm finding it tough. Taking people on the journey with you, but being realistic about what you want to share and when. You don't need to share everything. But I think being able to, on reflection, share certain learnings is really empowering for other people who might be going through the same thing. And people love authenticity. They love transparency. They love people who are honest and don't pretend like things are amazing all the time. You know, I talk about my struggles, but I talk about them on reflection, as a like learning. You know, this was tough. This is what I've learned. If you're going through it, you will get through it. So yeah, I think that's really important to remember. And Instagram is so curated. You're only ever going to see the good bits.
Yeah, definitely. But I think that's such a good point, though, like in terms of you don't have to say it right then when you're crying. It doesn't make you a bad person to keep it in until you feel comfortable talking about it. Like you can do it when you've had some time to, you know, work through it yourself. And because for me, that actually, I actually have never thought about it like that. Like I keep being like, oh, well, like to be honest, I have to post it right now when I'm upset right then. I don't want to do that because that feels really vulnerable. But I like that. I'm gonna adopt that for myself. Thank you. Cool. Well, is there anything else that you kind of wish people knew about community building that they might not know already from watching this great video?
I think enjoy the journey, because it's a long one. It's a marathon, it's not a race. Things take time, and things that are worth having need time to flourish. So excuse the pun, but they really do. Things aren't going to happen overnight. Enjoy it. You know that your community are going to be your friends, so be open with them, trust them, and I guess just enjoy the process. I keep saying that, but you know, the last 2 years have been incredibly tough, but when I look back, it's so lovely to see like where the business has what it's gone through and where it is today, and it's thanks to that journey. So try to be present in it and not rush away the weeks and months, you know, just enjoy. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, definitely. So if people really enjoyed this conversation, want more of you and Found and Flourished, where can they find you online?
Great question. So we are at Found Flourished everywhere. So Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, we're foundflourished.co.uk. So give us a follow, check us out, come to our online events, and looking forward to getting to know some of the rest of this community.